Hello, I'm Andrew Hara, the host of the Bomb Squad. I wanted to tell you about my movies. All are available on Tubi, which is a free streaming service. The last one is a zombie drama about how a pandemic and isolation could drive a group of people mad. When the virus hits, John finds himself alone and scared until he meets Michael, his protector. But when Karina, another survivor, enters the mix, everything that John and Michael knew will be turned on its head. The last one is a zombie virus movie that's somehow even more relevant today. Plus, it has zombies. Check it out. Borderland is a mexploitation film about living in El Paso. When Sarah finds herself in debt to the cartels, she has until sunrise to find some missing monies with the help of her executioner. Borderland is a true midnight movie and a lot of fun. Finally, the documentary Humble Spirits tells the story of the Hahn family, including champion Jennifer Hahn from El Paso, Texas. The entire Hahn family has grown up in the combat sports and has helped shape who they are both in and out of the ring. Humble Spirits, a family of fighters, is the perfect documentary for boxing fans of all ages. Check out Tubi to watch all my films. Finally, The Empty Space, winner of multiple awards, including the Sacramento Horror Film Festival's Best of the Fest, is a cosmic horror about Amy Andrews, who's dealing with anxiety and depression after a violent attack that killed her husband. As she tries to find herself, she starts to lose her grasp on reality. Or could it be something much more sinister? The Empty Space is full of twists and turns, with Grace DeWilder of Rue Morgue magazine calling it a powerful film full of excellent performances by practically every cast member. All of Andrew Hada's movies are available to rent or buy on streaming services such as Tubi, Amazon, and many other places. We hope that you help support us by watching these films. Now, let's start the Bomb Squad. What's up, guys? Thank you so much for liking the Xeno month and then really not liking it as the Alien Covenant Views
No
show.
one likes Covenant, so
Yeah, well, according to Film Twitter, everyone loves Covenant, but apparently not when we look at the numbers. But yeah, welcome back to the Bomb Squad. I'm Andrew. This is September. It's kind of a fun month, though. There's not really anything we want to talk about, so we're just covering random things this month. Get ready for Halloween. And so today we're talking about Lord of War, the 2005 movie directed and written by Andrew. Oh, good name, Nikolai, and starring Nicolas Cage, Ethan Hawke, Jared Leto, and Bridget Moynihan. The IMDb forgot to put her at the top, but Andrew did not. But yeah, why don't Josh? This is
Absolutely.
your pick. This is a Josh pick. So Josh, why don't you tell us what this movie is
Oh,
about?
this is about Nicolas Cage is a gun runner who essentially kind of lives through the end of the Cold War into the modern era of selling guns. But is he selling guns or his soul?
Damn,
oh my God.
Oh,
And is there a receipt?
we got it.
Oh,
Yeah. Lord of War is also leaving Hulu, so I don't know where you can find it. But why don't we talk about what did you guys think of this movie?
this definitely used to be one that I really liked,
Yeah,
like in high school and right out of high school. Whenever I was like super into
yeah,
like Goodfellas and Casino
yeah.
and Snatch and stuff. Like, not saying that it's like a bad movie, but like during that was like the peak period of those movies for me. And like this was one. Like I had this and The Departed on my DVR, and I would go home from college all the time and just like get a large pizza
Yeah.
and like watch either of those movies. And so this was like a major
See,
like
and
nostalgia
it's kind of funny you
rewatch
say that because I
doing
do
this
think
one.
like so in the '90s, and we kind of covered a couple of them with like Corruptor. You have like Copland, where they're like trying to mimic this kind of Scorsese style of
oh
film.
yeah.
But like back in the '90s, they did it
Hmm.
by being like these gritty, hardcore films. But in the 2000s, like this is 2005. Also think of Thank You for Smoking, which was like 2006 or something like that. But yeah, they try to
That
emulate the kind of
voiceover.
style of Scorsese movies where it was like like in this movie, it starts off with Nicolas Cage like he's like giving facts, and he's like 1 in every 11 people in the world is a gun owner. How do we arm the other 10? And it's
Yeah.
like that's a very Scorsese line. And like every line of dialogue he has, like he's talking to Jared
Right.
Leto who plays his brother, and he goes, he's trying to get him to join his gun running thing, and he's like, "But Callie, I don't even. You're not a good cook. I don't even eat at the restaurant, and I work there. You know, like,
Yeah.
every line." Yeah.
Right. And it's also a restaurant with the
Yeah.
guy storing
Yeah, it's
potato or
very-
tomatoes.
very on
It's
the
like
nose.
so fucking Scorsese.
And so these, oh yeah, it's the most on the nose.
Yeah,
movie of all
yeah.
time. But these movies, it's such a weird
Yeah.
genre because like I feel like this movie you could watch it and completely forget about it, but there's also people who will watch a movie like this and it'll be their favorite movie of all time. You know, like
Oh yeah,
it's
I love
just-
this movie for the record.
Right.
Yeah, it's just depending on how much you
Hell
like,
yeah,
how
yeah.
invested you want to be in the world that they're trying to tell you. You know, and it's kind of like I can see people being annoyed with it just because it's like very like, don't you know that dummy? Like every line of dialogue is like that. Like, don't you see
Yeah.
how clever we are?
Yeah.
But it,
The line that I used to really love, there's a part in the movie where he's like talking about who he sells to and doesn't sell to, and then he goes, "I never sold to Bin Laden, not on any moral grounds, but because back then
Yeah.
Bin Laden was always bouncing checks." And whenever I saw that back then, I was always like,
yeah,
Yeah.
like,
"Oh my god!"
he said that, yeah.
Yeah, this is
And it's-
yeah.
Well, and let's
Yeah.
talk. So, like, after he says that little line of dialogue, then we get into one of the coolest openings that anyone has seen. It's like, he's an arms
Yeah.
dealer, so we're following a bullet being made, and it goes like from the factory to getting like
Mhm.
shaped to like going through like it gets in a box, and then it's like being traveled across the ocean. Then it gets to like the Congo. Then they like throw it in like a bunch of other bullets. Someone like puts, and it's all the POV of the bullet, and it's set to the song like "There's Something Happening."
Yeah.
Here, which
Yeah.
is, like a very like
The
Vietnam
most of the
Yeah.
time, yeah.
and so then
Right.
they start shooting it, and it
Yeah,
ends with like, and I think
quintessential
that's why
protest.
this movie works
Yeah.
in a lot of ways that other movies don't work. I think of Raw Dogs. I think I was watching a very different movie. I think of War Dogs, the Jonah Hill. Yeah, the Jonah
Lord
Hill,
of Raw
and
Dogs.
like that movie
Yeah.
doesn't work because it doesn't do what this movie does. Like at the end of this cool sequence, they shoot the gun, and it like we follow the gun as it's gonna hit his target, and we realize the target is like a 12-year-old kid, and like that's why this movie works in a lot
Yeah.
of ways that other movies don't work, is because this movie being so on the nose, there's never that moment of like, oh, maybe what they're doing isn't that bad. Like they want to reinforce every single time like how deadly these bullets are, and like how much they're
Right.
bad. Yeah,
Totally. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of kid deaths for
and
sure.
so
that
I think
see.
that really adds
Yeah.
to the commentary of it, because I think like if you take out how vicious these things are, you kind of lose what you're trying to say and why it's so bad. Especially like because we're mainly following Nicolas Cage's character as he's and like it's
Yeah. He's very intent on like being like
Yeah.
a moral-less guy. He's very
He-
always trying
yeah,
to like
he-
turn a blind eye to what he's doing.
He always kind of
So,
does like the
that
"oh, I'm not
juxtaposition.
culpable. I just sell the guns. I don't shoot them." And it's kind of one of those where it's like, you know, he's
Right.
lying. He knows he's lying, but it's like that's
Yeah.
like the crux of the film, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, like there's a part where he says something
Right,
about like
right.
he goes, "Oh, I hope every bullet that I sell misses." You think he tells Ethan Hawke, and it's like such a bullshit line. Like,
Yeah.
he doesn't care.
Yeah.
It's also, like
Yeah.
it is kind of funny, and I didn't totally like catch this the first time, but he talks about how. And I think it's like this is like based on a true story, but very loosely. It's like, oh, this is based on
Yeah.
like 6 different gun sellers. Not it's like an amalgamation.
Yeah.
Of them. But
Yeah.
he's like, oh, I grew up. We're from the Ukraine, but like to get out of the Ukraine, my father pretended to be like Jewish just to like so he
Right.
could like fake escape religious persecution in the Ukraine to come here, and it's almost like. Okay, so it's like you're already starting off with his like family pretending to be someone else, so he's already kind of like living a life of like low key deception, and then he just kind of
Yeah.
rolls it into
Totally.
like his entire identity.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, oh, that's kind of an
Yeah.
interesting like, you know,
Yeah.
he's like
That's true.
And
faking being
yeah.
a persecuted minority. You know,
I think that's a really good idea, and it also kind of leads
Right.
into this like idea that you don't see too often, or like people who immigrate from this country will kind of adopt too much of like a certain culture, you know, like
Yeah.
you even see it like a lot of you
Right.
see a lot of
Right.
Mexicans who are like Latinos for Trump, and it's like, are you sure? Like, have you looked into that?
Yeah.
And like I've had people who have immigrated, and then they've immigrated like a year ago, and then they're like, oh, we can't have all these illegals coming in, and it's like, well, what do you think you were doing? Like,
Well.
like, and I
Yeah.
like that they add that kind of touch because it kind of sets off Nicolas Cage's character in a good way because you realize like he's seen through his own eyes that sometimes you just gotta lie to survive, and so like the dad did it in this way
Hmm.
like to literally survive, but he's kind of doing it in this way to like, oh well, I can just get as rich as possible. And so, but it's like you see that kernel of where
Right.
it's
Right.
coming from, you know?
Yeah, like the and then you kind of have like the parallel
Totally.
is
Yeah.
and this is like this movie every theme will be told to you directly, but Jared Leto like as the cook, he has a
Yeah.
beware of dog like sign in the kitchen, and Nick
Oh my
Cage
god,
is
yes.
Nick Cage is like
Yes. Yeah.
why do you
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
sign? Did we get a dog? He's like, no, it reminds me to not be the dog that's in me to want to fuck or kill everything that moves, man.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then Nick Cage is like,
I
"What if
know,
that's the
I
best part of
know.
my life?
I
The dog." And I was like, as a
I
kid, like,
put
"Oh my god, you're right, dude.
my note for this
What
is
is the
Jared
best
Leto's
part?"
playing a Hot Topic racetrack. Like he's
Yeah.
playing like the posters that they sell at Hot Topic. Because every line of dialogue, he's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
"Guys, can you be too sexy and mysterious at the same time?"
Yeah,
Like,
he's
okay, man, we got it.
he's very like
Yeah,
justice
yeah.
or just us. You know,
Yeah.
that's like
And
that.
I think like
Yeah.
that makes it even funny because like Jared Leto is annoying, and so him playing like to me he
Yeah.
works best when he's playing someone where you can't tell it's Jared Leto. And so in this one where you can clearly tell it's Jared
Yeah.
Leto, they kind of prop him up as this like naive kind of like guy who like I don't know, he just kind of seems annoying.
Yeah, and it is kind of like they do a good job
Right.
because he
I
is
will.
super annoying and he's a drug addict, which you like kind of like that kind of becomes what his like journey is. But he's
Yeah.
also the only one like
Mm-hmm.
second guessing, like, hey, is this wrong? So it's almost like
Right.
it's good to have like Nick Cage's only like moral voice be this guy. He's going to be like, no, you're a drug addict loser. Why would I listen to you? Even though he
Yeah.
is right about this one thing,
Yeah.
you know, so
And
it's
my
like
little
that.
brother.
It's like
Yeah.
it's a good dynamic,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish they would have gone a little bit further into it too, like because Jared Leto starts going with Nicolas Cage on the
Yeah.
on the gun runs, and then they find some violence, and then Jared Leto sees a kid get killed, and then he kind of spirals into like drug addiction, and so it was kind of hard to tell if the movie was trying to tell us that like the stuff he saw is what
Right.
caused him to be an addict,
See-
or was he an addict before? Like it was, I kind of wish they would have like gone a little bit more into his
Yeah,
character.
I think if
and, like, what his
anything is
troubles
like, yeah,
were.
they don't really dive into like one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit later is that this movie has a surprising amount of characters, and I don't think it needs as many. But because of that, everyone who's not Nicolas Cage, like even the wife, they kind of lose a lot of their characterization. So like, there are certain scenes that should hit a little bit harder, but they don't because we don't know the characters as much. Like one of the things is his
Right.
so he's from the Ukraine, and they pretended to be Jewish to immigrate to America, and they ended up like in wherever they are, they don't like it either.
Brighton
So
Beach,
he's trying to get out.
so like
Brighton
the
Beach,
slums
yes.
of New York. Yeah,
Yeah.
And so, but there's this girl who also came from the same area, and she's become like a model. And like throughout the beginning of the movie, Nicolas Cage is talking about how he has a crush on her, and he keeps seeing her like everywhere he goes, like on advertisements and everything. And like eventually, once he starts getting to gun running, he makes her his wife, which we'll talk about later. But I feel like she has more characterization when he's talking about her being like the fly on the wall, like every time he sees an ad, than she actually does once he starts to get to know her, which is like a little bit disappointing, you know. And it's kind of
Yeah.
it's like this is why Scorsese movies are 2.5 hours long. It's like you need that time.
Right.
yeah,
Right.
you know,
right.
it's almost like the inverse, where
Mhm.
like, yeah, his wife isn't a major character but should be, but then they'll be like like at one point he kind of what like starts the like Jared Leto like spiral is this one guy wants to like pay them with a brick of like a couple bricks of cocaine instead of money, and
Right.
he's like I'm a gun seller, not a drug seller, and then and it gets heated, and the guy like shoots him, and there'll be like a bunch of like one-off like little like drug lords or like warlords he's selling to who are in one scene where like, oh, this is like a super colorful like character with two lines,
Yeah.
but then like his wife won't have like a
Right.
you know, like it's very like
Right. Right.
he like put it all into these little like
Yeah,
vignettes,
yeah.
but
She's
not a
just
lot
hot
of
girl.
the crux. Yeah,
It's interesting because you
Totally,
say that
totally.
like it's like like it's a conglomerate of a bunch of different arms, and I think sometimes that ends up working against the movie because things are like too condensed. So he wants to start dealing drugs. Drugs. He wants to start dealing guns. He meets with someone from the synagogue, and they so they sell him a couple of things, and he like sells his first drug, and it's a very funny scene where he like sells one Uzi, and then he immediately goes to Jared Leto. And he's like, "You should join my criminal empire. Like, we're gonna begin." It's like, buddy, this is one
Yeah,
sale,
dude.
and you almost got shot.
Right.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, you were
Yeah.
scared as fuck the
But
whole time.
then his first big
Yeah.
break is he like goes and meets another drug sales manufacturer who's like he was like the Bill Gates of drug sales, and like the guy basically tells him like, "You're small potatoes. Get the hell out of here," you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
This
but
isn't
his
time for
first
amateurs.
big break comes when the Soviet Union falls, and so the Ukraine, oh, funny, the Ukraine just ends up with like a bunch of
Yeah.
arms because the U.S. doesn't take their arms with them, and his uncle is in charge of all those arms, so he's able to sell it. And so that's a cool scene. And then
Mhm.
like they even do this part where like that same drug dealer who kind of or gun dealer, I do this a lot, guys. Who's like who told him to f off. He comes to try to buy the guns, and the uncle's like, "No, loyalty is family's more
Yeah.
important." And then they're like, "That's great." And then in
Yeah.
that same scene, they're like, he's like, "Yeah, his loyalty's unmatched. He was always gonna love family over everything." And then like the uncle's like, "Thanks for the new car. I'm definitely going to this car, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
start it right up, and nothing's ever gonna happen." Then he
I'm
like
gonna
walks down
drive
the
away.
stairs,
Yeah.
and then he gets into the car, and we keep going in wider and wider. I'm like, okay, guys, I understand what's gonna happen. But then that car
Yeah, yeah. We get
explodes.
it.
But like watching it now, I was like, okay, but he's only been drug dealing for or gun dealing. I told you, he's only been gun dealing for like a month. Like
yeah, it's very,
they,
like it
in
is.
real life, you would assume
Yeah.
this was established, and after years, they killed his. They finally got to his uncle. But because this movie's like has so much to
Right.
say, that whole little segment takes like 2 minutes.
It's very that's kind of the same thing where you're
Right.
like, oh man, his uncle's dead. And it's like, well, his uncle's been in 3 scenes, so I
Yeah.
don't know if that hits.
Right. Right. I wasn't sure if this was
Yeah,
another
exactly.
vignette.
Yeah,
or
if this is like a
like-
crux, but we should say too the rival gun seller is Ian Holm, which we
Yes.
just recently saw a much
Yeah,
worse
yeah.
movie
Real-
with the
really
CGI
Ian
Ian Holm.
Oh,
Yeah,
the CGI
I
version.
didn't see
Yeah.
home. I saw a bunch of computer images that were ripping someone off, but that's
well,
all
that
I
yeah,
saw.
that's fair.
Yeah.
Of a real pro.
Yeah. Ian Holm
Yeah.
doing a good job.
They-
Like,
That's also
Maybe.
like that's such a funny because there's this like through line that Nick Cage is like the coolest guy ever because they go to when he first meets Ian Holm, they're at this like big gun expo where it's literally playing Ride of the Valkyries because again every
right.
music choice
Oh,
is
yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
like what you would think of first to be like, well, let's do something less obvious. But this movie's like, no, let's do that song.
Yeah.
And they have the showgirls like
Yeah.
dancing on the tank, and it's
Mhm.
very like The Simpsons, like, oh, do you come with the car? But in this
Yeah.
universe, Nick Cage and Jared Leto, of course, bang all 3 showgirls at the gun
Right.
expo. They sleep with
Yeah.
every beautiful
Absolutely.
woman they see.
Absolutely.
You know?
And then Nick Cage is just
Yeah.
doing it like, but I'm still
I know.
pondering about my
Yeah.
empire. I don't really care.
But I
about
have
this
a
woman that's on top
question.
of me.
You said that
So cool.
Nick Cage is like cool. I don't know. I thought that he was kind of a pathetic loser. Like anytime he hooks up with a girl, I assume that he's paying her because like
No,
he
I
uses
always
money
thought
for
that.
Oh yeah. But he acts
See, and
cool.
that's
He
the-
tries to always
I think
act
that's,
like
again, that's what I
fucking
like about
baller.
him is that like that scene where he gets shot and they give him the cocaine. It's like he lets everyone walk all over him, which is why like he's such a scumbag in this
No,
movie.
no, I
And,
agree,
like,
but I think it's like
Mhm.
it's told from his point of view because in his narration he's like, "Rule number one: never get shot with your own gun." And in that scene, he gets shot with his own gun. So
yeah,
it's almost
Right,
like
right.
David Fincher's The Killer, where it's like his narration doesn't match what you're seeing, but in his mind, he's the
right, right.
coolest guy ever.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Which I
yeah.
appreciate.
That makes
Yeah.
You know.
sense. Yeah, yeah. And so
Yeah.
like so eventually like after he gets that first sale and he starts selling money, what he does is like and this is why like I think he's a loser. He like books the model into a hotel and then he buys out the whole hotel just to spend time with her. And I think that was the thing like
Oh yeah.
because he's like, yeah, I did all this just to get her around her, and then like well, I'll talk about that in a second. But there's like this part where she's like, oh, I had this flight and I can't leave till Tuesday because there's no other flights out of here. The photo shoot got canceled. There's nobody else here. Like I'm bored. And then he's like, oh, you can fly with me on my private jet tomorrow. And I was like, dude, your plan was to buy out a whole place, but then you were gonna leave the next day with her. Like, what if she said no?
Yeah, or
Like,
whatever. It
Right,
took
what's
him
your
a
right.
while to
second
come
plan?
around.
Yeah, why wouldn't you wait till Tuesday?
And then like he like right. And then he also he spends all this crazy amount of money to like rent this whole hotel out, and then he like has to like write a fake name on
Yeah,
a plane. But it's like you
I
could
think
couldn't you
I
just
think
like have bought a
it's
plane?
it
Like if
does
he's
kind of
that
do the
rich?
like until the Soviet like the Cold War ends, he's like kind of rich, but not like as rich as he
not as
thinks he
he said,
should
and he
be.
he
So he's
does
still
mention
like,
that. Yeah,
and then once the
Yeah.
Cold War happened, he's like
and
huge, like hugely wealthy. You know.
and I think that kind of brings up
Right.
like the point that Josh was saying. So like there's a cool scene where he once they get to the plane that he's gonna like take her home on, he like says like, "Oh, I paid some guys to write my name on it," which is also like, buddy, only Tyrese from Fast and Furious puts their own name on a plane. Like what the hell?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
like
yeah.
there's a cool scene where they fly
That's not
away and
cool.
like the paint like is starting to smear off because it's so fresh. But he says
Yeah.
something along the lines like, "Oh, I knew that she wasn't the type of girl to be impressed with a plane," and I was like, "Oh, that's kind of sweet." It's like, unless you own the plane, it's like, but then like her
Yeah, yeah.
characterization is not like that. Like she doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, she's
Yeah,
not
she seems to
shallow.
always like. I mean, she accepts his gifts, but like not in a "oh, this is the only reason we're together" way, which kind of leads credence to the fact that like the way he views the world through his voiceover and the things that are actually happening are so different that you're almost like, hey man, are you paying
Yeah.
attention to what's going on? Like even with his brother, like as Jared Leto gets more and more crazy, like there's a part where he's like, I should have known that how far he was going. But like every scene after the first scene with Jared Leto, he's like shaking and sweating.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
very like
yeah.
because he's like, yeah, I never knew what was going on with him. It's like, well, he just watched a bunch of children get executed, so maybe
Yeah.
that's what's going on with him, you know?
You
Right.
had to
And then left with a brick
you
of
had to
cocaine
talk
and
him
too.
down from like killing like soldiers that
Yeah.
you just sold your guns to. Like maybe that should have been some clues.
But that, yeah, I know
Right,
that's almost
right.
what like, and he almost has this. There's this also this through line again, kind of one of those things where I like picked it up this time where his wife's always kind of like melancholy, and like even like
Yeah.
during their wedding, he's like, "Oh
Mhm.
yeah, it would have been like your parents and you know something like that about her parents." He's like, "But they're like watching us," and she's like, "You don't believe that?" Because she's like, she knows he doesn't believe in anything. You know, it's like
Right.
she kind of understands him more than
Right,
he
right.
realizes, and then you find out at the end of the movie, like, because he's just like, "Oh, she's always sad about her parents," but he doesn't say why. And it's like at the end that her parents were killed in like a robbery with like guys who just bought guns illegally in like Brighton Beach, and it's like, yeah, you're the reason her parents died. Of course, she
Right.
would hate this, you know, like, which
Right.
is
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's kind of a
Yeah.
funny movie about like what he thinks he's like, I'm getting away with all of this. It's like, no, everyone knows you're an asshole.
Yeah.
But in your mind,
Yeah.
you're
Right, right.
pulling it off.
Yeah.
You know.
And I
He's essentially Jared Leto, but like just in
Right.
a different way. Like everyone can see that he's fucked
Yeah.
up the whole time, but just
yeah.
differently.
And like
you
I
know?
do like that because he
Yeah,
does that a
it's
lot
lying.
where he'll be like, oh, the cops never could touch me. Except for this one time where it's happening right now. It's like,
Yeah, and it will happen several more. Oh, and also, yeah, Ethan Hawke being the
Yeah.
cop. It's like Ethan Hawke is always such like a bastion
Yeah.
of justice in like
see,
everything
and I'll
he's
say
in.
so like the first two kind of like half of the movie, it's mainly just Nicolas Cage as he's built his empire. He's dealing with different warlords, and then after he gets married, it kind of splits off into two kind of things they're focused on. The first one is the Ethan Hawke. So Ethan Hawke plays the cop that's chasing him. He's like supposed to be he like William just said. He plays every Ethan Hawke cop character ever, so he can't ever be bought.
Yeah.
And then there's also this character who's like an African drug dealer who's like the worst version of the drug dealer or the gun runners he's already been selling to. And it's like, I love that African gun runner guy, like that dictator.
Baptiste.
I think Ethan Hawke. Ethan Hawke to
he's
me
great.
is too much. He's like every character or every line of dialogue, he's like got the halo over his head. And he's just like, listen, buddy.
Yeah.
I didn't vote for President Kamala Harris for you to be breaking the law. You know, it's like, okay, man, you don't have to like recite the presidency.
You know what it is, though? It is
right.
The whole movie's kind of this, where it's like it's a less smart version of the cop Coach Taylor in Wolf of Wall Street, who's chasing Leo, where it's like this guy, everyone knows he's guilty, and it's obvious, and it's just the fact that like he's like exploiting these loopholes to get away with these very obvious crimes. And the only cop, the cop is just so frustrated because he refuses to like break the law to catch him, and it's like, so it's an interesting dynamic. But you're like, okay, but this isn't Wolf of Wall Street, so it's not quite like gonna like hit the same way, you know?
Yeah.
But
right. Okay. And it's also like Ethan Hawke has been on the job for a while, so it's like every reaction he has wouldn't be like. It's like the first time he's ever met with like a shitty criminal. It's like he would be a little jaded.
He's like, wait, bureaucrats sometimes hinder the case? It's like, is this your first day every day?
He's almost not in enough, but I do love because there's like almost like 3 like major scenes of him getting one over, because the first one they're like on a ship and they like quickly change the name, and that's like fine. And then the next time Ethan Hawke like has him like where he's like over like the fields of Africa. And he's like gonna shoot down his plane. So, and this is a cool scene because they like they land the plane in the middle of like the African just like jungle. And then he just gives he just like lets all the villagers like take it, and then they like field strip the plane in like a time lapse, and it's like it's pretty cool, you know. There's a bunch of cool little set piece moments like that.
That's especially when you compare it to Kyle Chandler's character in Wolf of Wall Street. Like, it's such a funny because like. That first scene, which is really cool with the boat, is really good. And, like, the plane scene's pretty cool, except for the part where they're, like... So they're flying in the plane, and they're like, hey, we're never going to get caught, huh? And Nicolas Cage's like, that's right, because we're over African. Here's all the dialogue that we need to explain. And then an airplane, like, pulls up next to them. Like, every scene is, like, introduced with, like, here's what's going to be the conflict of this scene.
Right.
And so an airplane pulls up next to him, and it's like, hey, you guys got to pull down. We're the FBI or whatever. And, like, that's cool, except for the fact that Ethan Hawke is in the
He's in the jet. I know.
It's like, no, he wouldn't be.
Oh, I didn't even realize that he was
takes a little while because it's so ridiculous.
It basically should have had him, like, parachuting down afterwards to, like, catch him red-handed.
Again, like, and I think that's why it's funny, because again, this movie does want us to compare it to Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh yeah, it's like a dumb Wolf of Wall Street.
I have to compare it.
It's like YA Casino.
I have to compare it to Fast and Furious because, like, there's that Fast and Furious.
It's somewhere in between.
Because there's like that Fast and Furious where Jason Statham is introduced, and like. They'll have an action scene, and then Jason Statham will just show up at the end to, like, make things worse for no real reason. But it's never explained, like, how he got there, how he knows where they were, how he knows any of the players involved. That's Ethan Hawke's character. Like, anytime they need any cop doing anything, it has to be Ethan Hawke. Even though it makes no sense.
They even have, on the first boat scene, kind of the way they get around it is, like, they change the flag, they change the name real quick by, like, painting it on the side, and then... They, like, have the guns, like, hidden under some, like, old potatoes. So it's like, oh, it smells so bad. They don't want to investigate it. And then they literally show, like, as Ethan Hawke's walking away, the potatoes fall a little further and the guns are right there. So it's like, so he really didn't even pack those guns in, like, deep. Like, if Ethan Hawke had just, searched a little bit. And it's like, Every scene is
Yeah.
just very like flying
And
by
I
the
want to
seat of its
say
And
pants.
like, why did they have those
that
potatoes?
scene always. I know, and no one's like, okay, but why do you have rancid potatoes? Like, what are you? Where are you taking them?
Yeah, where are you shipping
And
these
that
to?
scene always makes me so mad because like they open the container and like a bunch of potatoes fall out, but you can see like a bunch of empty space, and then you see the guns and they're also like halfway through, and I'm like, why do you have so many of these containers when they're not even half full? Like fill them all the way up,
Right.
Nicolas Cage. This is why you're always
Yeah,
traveling because you
yeah,
don't fill them up. Um,
yeah.
It's,
These were
this
big
whole
actual.
movie's just shorthand.
yeah,
Whenever he and it does definitely shift focus to like it's Liberia, the country that he's selling like guns to. And just like the shorthand to show you how bad it is. The first thing you see is the warlord's son pulls up with a golden AK and two like women dressed like Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders and like a
yeah.
convertible. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, evil dictator, psychopath son.
Yeah.
I get it, you know.
Got
And
it. Got it. Got
it's
it.
Iman
Yeah.
Walker. He plays the dictator, and he does a great job. Like, I just really like.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just really like African accents. Like, you don't hear them a lot in movies, so anytime you do, it's kind of
Yeah.
cool because it's such a unique accent. But he's like playing this
Right.
dictator, and like the first thing he does is Nicolas Cage is showing him the gun, and like there's a guy distracted by one of the girls dancing, so he just shoots him, and then Nicolas Cage is like
Yeah.
trying to freak out, but he's trying to keep it together, and it's just like that's to me that guy fits perfectly in the world, and I wanted to explore him more. And it's not that I don't like Ethan Hawke. I think it's just the time that they had remaining. They should have just done one or the other, and the Dictator's so much more interesting
Yeah.
than Ethan Hawke that
Yeah.
I wish. And as sad as it is, because I do love Ethan Hawke, I think that they should have given more time to the Dictator, and then just kind of had the cops be nameless.
I think it almost
You
like
know?
it's such a bit like
Yeah.
Ethan Hawke's such a big actor for such a kind of small role, and I think it's just
Yeah.
because I think Ethan Hawke's worked with
Yeah.
Andrew Nichols a lot before. Like he directed Gattaca and stuff, so it's like
Right.
I think it's just
Yeah,
one of
yeah,
those like,
yeah.
hey, you want to be in my movie in like 4 scenes, you know?
Yeah.
It's just
Right. Right.
So
And it's only a 2 hour long movie, but it did feel really
does.
long. Like it felt like it was like
And it
3
feels
hours.
episodic.
Like not like in a
Yeah.
negative way.
it felt,
Yeah,
it felt
yeah.
very very lingering. You know,
I
they
think it's
linger a
'cause-
lot. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
will say, like, one of the things it does do that Scorsese also does is it's able to pass like a long period of time without without you
Kinda
thinking about it. Because
sprawling
like
movies.
at the beginning, I don't
Yeah.
know how old Nicolas Cage is supposed to be at the beginning, but he's clearly supposed to be a lot younger than he's playing because they give him like the
Yeah.
Stranger Things haircut where it's
Yeah.
like just to the side.
He's riding his bike to school.
Yeah. Yeah.
This 45
But he's
year old
played
man.
by like 40-year-old.
I'm gonna pass ninth grade, Jared Leto.
But so like by the time we're getting to the dictator, like so much stuff has happened where he's gone from being a nobody to being kind of a successful gun runner to being so successful that like that guy, the one who he told him off earlier, like comes and says we should work together, and Nicolas Cage is able to like, and of course in like this movie, Nicolas Cage's character is able to like tell him off and be like, I wasn't good enough for you then, and I'm not good enough for you now. And it's like, well, you are right. Like, kind of suck as a person.
Yeah.
They
But
kind of
it's
do
like-
a shorthand because you see his son age. Like first it's like, oh, he's a baby, and now he's doing his first steps, and Nicolas
Yeah.
Cage is ignoring all that because he does
Right.
not give a shit about his family. But
Yeah.
it's happening in the background.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
get the sense that it's been a few years. So you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like then, and I really like, so Jared Leto, like they find out he's doing drugs, so they like take him to rehab. But like right before he goes into rehab, Nicolas Cage gives him like one last bump. And then like throughout the movie, he does
Yeah.
it multiple times. He's always like giving him one last
Right.
bump.
Every time he goes to rehab. Yeah.
So I think like stuff like that, it's one of those movies that it thinks it's very clever. And for most part, it is very clever. It's like a smart film. And
Yeah.
like it's that thing where, you know, there's a scene where he finally starts getting into gun running and someone's shooting a gun, but instead of the gun noise, it's a cha-ching.
Yeah, the
every time a
cash
bullet
register,
comes out.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
listen-
Very MIA. Paper planes. Yeah.
It's like, listen, you're either on board with this or you're not. And I understand why people wouldn't be.
Right.
But it's, you know, it's kind of like I think of Wes Anderson when people are like, why can't Wes Anderson make a normal movie? And it's like, I don't go see Wes Anderson movies to see a normal movie. I go see a
Yeah,
Wes Anderson movie.
I want
Like,
this
I
to be
Right.
a
don't want to
carnival.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to see
Yeah.
Oppenheimer every single time where like Christopher Nolan likes to stick to realism. I want to see something sometimes
Yeah.
that's just a fable. It's like The Menu. I like The Menu a lot, and I like this one a lot. But
Yeah.
they're both like they don't exist in real worlds,
But it's like like to
Right.
me it is like making like it does come back around in a way where you're like, oh, I could see why this wouldn't like work. But like realistically, I don't know. It's making real points, even if it's doing it in a cartoonish
Yeah.
way. Like it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, like the United States is like a huge piece of shit hypocrite. You
Yeah.
know, like that, like that's very on point. You know.
Yeah. And
Right.
also,
Right.
like, it's also funny, like, how and I think that might be a little bit of why it feels like a vignette, because, like, the first time Ethan Hawke and Nicolas Cage meet, Nicolas Cage, like, literally just tells you out loud, it's like, oh, he's one of those guys who you could never bribe. But it's okay because I can bribe everyone
Yeah.
around him. And then later, when
Yeah.
they get pulled over by the plane, there's like there's like the cop who's from the African country that they're from, and he like pulls out a machete that cops are just given in this world, and he like
Right.
puts the
Right.
knife up to his cage like, we can just do it, no one will notice, and he's like, can't do that, and it's like,
Yeah. We
we don't
will.
need to reestablish that he's like a real good
Yeah,
family.
it's
Yeah.
such a like yeah. But they also
We are gentlemen
I
of
almost
Harvard.
love too, because yeah, like he gets into it with this like Liberian dictator or whatever, and it's obviously even worse than before, like the crimes he's committing, and then he comes back and the guy has captured Ian Holm, and he's like, hey. It's like it's your rival. He killed your uncle. Come on, let's shoot him together. And he puts like both their hand on the gun. And he's like, you can like just say no, just say stop, and like we won't do this. Because until that point, Nicolas Cage had never actually shot anyone. And then he squeezes the trigger, and like a second after he squeezes the trigger, Nicolas Cage is like, stop. And it's like such a good like, oh, he wants to like pretend he's neutral still, so he had to say that even like when it was too late. And it's like it's got a lot of good where he's like, oh, he's lying to himself, it's fun.
See, and
Yeah.
that's why I like the dictator more than I like Ethan Hawke's character, because the dictator puts like he challenges Ethan Hawke's narration up until this, like, and he's the only one who really does it. Like, everyone else is kind of like they fall into whatever Ethan or Nicolas Cage thinks of him. But the dictator, like the whole time, Nicolas Cage has like kind of positioned himself as like, yes, what I'm doing is shitty, but I'm only doing what I have to survive. And the dictator puts him in this world where it's like, no, you don't have to do it. You can just say no.
Yeah, he makes him confront himself essentially.
And that's
Right.
gonna
He actually
come up
challenges
later.
him. Yeah.
But because of those kind, like to me, that's one of the most important scenes, and why it sets itself from like I think of like Pain and Gain, which I like a lot, and we'll probably talk about it eventually. But Pain and Gain kind of like is constantly trying to forgive the main characters and be like, yeah, but they're just kind of dumb. Like, don't hold it against them. Where this movie is like, nah, like this guy sucks, and here's why.
Right.
And so I think like that kind of adds to it of like, oh yeah, he's not doing this for moral reasons.
Yeah, it's very.
He just likes money,
and it's such a good like because then after that it almost becomes like mystical because when he first gets there, the guy's like, "Hey, have these two prostitutes." And Nick Cage is like, "Oh, I'm not gonna sleep with a bunch of prostitutes without a condom in like the most AIDS infested like part of the world. Like that's crazy."
Yeah.
And then after this, it just spirals to him like. He's doing, he's just banging random prostitutes in Africa, being like, wait, are you sick? Am I sick? Who cares? And someone tries to, like, shoot him, and he's, like, trying to help them unjam the gun. And then he's literally staring down, like, hyenas in, like, a drunken haze who just won't kill him. And he's like, he just can't die. And I almost love, like, the, like, tortured, like, immortal man. Like, it's such a good...
It's like the Hulk.
And see, and like that's another scene I think that plays well into his characterization and why the warlord is so interesting. Because like there's when we first meet him and he goes like they take him to like this shitty hotel and everything, and like he finds the two girls and he's like, yeah, these AIDS infested women, and like and later the warlord's like, no, why would I do that? Why wouldn't I protect you? You're selling me guns. Like, but it's his prejudice.
Right.
Is just
Yeah,
like, oh, yeah,
and
as soon as
that's
I get
like
out there.
because one of the
Yeah.
criticisms of this movie is like, oh, every like minority character you see is either like a crazy warlord psychopath or just like a child soldier ready to
Yeah.
die. It's like, yeah, because that's how Nick Cage would see them. He wouldn't see them
Right.
like as people.
Mhm.
He would see them as like, oh, here's the people I'm going to sell to or who are going to die. I
Yeah.
don't care. You know,
Like,
Right,
he literally
right.
does not care about anyone who's not buying or selling
Yeah.
guns.
Yeah. He's essentially capitalism embodied.
Yeah, pretty much. And like, yeah. And so I think like, and it's not too easy. I mean, it's kind of hard to spoil a movie like this because it's more like, it's not so much what's happening in the plot. It's like the vibes essentially.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think even if those little critiques that we're kind of talking about, it's such a fun movie. It's really, and like I said,
Yeah.
like the fact that it's about something serious kind of adds to how fun it is because you're also like, you're able to take in what you think about gun running and all this kind of stuff. And like, again, you don't like how many movies actually show children soldiers and like them getting killed. Like, if you're gonna cover this arena, then you have to cover it the whole thing, especially like
Right.
if you're
right.
criticizing it.
Yeah, otherwise you're war dogs where you're like,
Mhm.
what is this movie about? you
Yeah.
know, like
Right. Is this fun or no?
Yeah.
it's
And I think like you need Tony Montana to be coked out on cocaine for it to like matter.
yeah, you need to see like, oh, here's how it would be shitty. It's
Yeah.
it's to also give you an idea of this movie's like sense of humor. I did not catch this the first time, but when I was watching it, when he first gets to that shitty little hotel in Africa, the clerk is like watching the OJ trial on the news, and he's like,
Yeah.
Oh, I would not.
yeah, he's
move.
like, when I get to America, I will not live in Brentwood. It's just like,
Yeah.
what a stupid joke. What a stupid
Yeah.
I know.
joke.
It's so funny. Yeah.
Oh man.
And it's like, and it's funny to like, I wonder if this movie, and like when I say does this movie get made, I of course mean because of Kamala Harris's regime against art.
Yeah.
No, but I think it's like after, this is like 2005, and it's like there's this bitterness from the war on terror that we came through, where like it's also from Thank You for Smoking, where there was that huge backlash against anything that was establishment, which is sadly kind of devolved into QAnon people. But like, I do wonder, like, if you were to make it, like, well, you'd get War Dogs, like this movie that's kind of trying to
Yeah.
say something, but the bite isn't strong enough, or like
Right.
that
Right.
guy made another
Yeah.
movie about a clown that doesn't make too much sense if you really think about it, and it's the same issue where it's like,
Mhm.
if anything, this one has too much to say.
Yeah.
Right,
It almost
right,
struggles
right.
to like have his personal narrative and a message, but I still think it's like,
Yeah.
I think it works well enough. Like it still like gets there,
Yeah.
even if it's a little clunky.
But see, I think
Yeah.
personally it works it's kind of like, it's the same thing with where I said, we talked about the menu in our year-end wrap, but I think the same thing where it's like, the menu, it was very much like, here's what I'm trying to say about capitalism. And
Mhm.
everything, like, don't worry about what this character is going to do tomorrow, because they do not exist. Like, it is just like a thesis. And I think like, sometimes you want that kind of movie. Like, sometimes you want a movie that's like hitting
A thought experiment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that's very much what this movie feels like. I think
Should we
it's good.
talk about the ending? The funniest, because he actually, his wife does catch him like briefly, like super briefly,
Mm-hmm.
and then he goes straight for like 6 months as like a timber salesman.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Then the warlord shows up at his apartment in New York and it's like, hey man, like the like regulations are clamping down. I need your special, gun seller touch to get this through customs. So he does decide, and he goes to Jared Leto, who's like, hey man, I finally cleaned up, and I have a girlfriend.
Oh,
My
yeah.
life's really getting together. I think
Yeah,
I'm on the
yeah.
right track.
Like I said,
Yeah. Nothing could go wrong.
Every scene is established to what you know the conflict is going to be.
He's like, oh,
Yeah.
just this one last job, and then my life's going to be perfect forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they go, and he's like, oh, actually, these guns aren't for me. They're for my neighbors in Sierra Leone, which he knows like the most blood diamond soaked country.
Yeah.
And Jared Leto's like, they're gonna like kill like this entire village of kids, and Nick Cage is
Yeah.
like, we're selling guns. Let's
Yeah.
get to it.
Not morals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so Jared Leto
Professor Leto.
freaks out, blows
Yeah.
up one of the shipments, and this trend, and then they just gun him down. And it's very, very on point.
And
Yeah.
see, and like, yeah, and then there's like the part where like Nicolas Cage like puts the grenade back because he like has the grenade out and he like puts the pin back in the grenade, and Jared Leto like sees the betrayal and then he dies, and it's like, yeah, man, he probably wasn't gonna blow himself up, to be honest. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
It's just a rogue move.
That to me is interesting because they're both right in the sense because Nick Cage is like, yeah, if we don't sell these guns to them, they'll kill us. Like, like this, you're stupid.
Yeah.
And then Jared Leto's like, yeah, but this is like the worst crime a human being could commit. He's like,
right.
So.
See, and I think that's what kind of sets Scorsese apart from these kind of movies because like nobody in Goodfellas gives a shit about the morals about it. Like they immediately let him go. And I think like to me, this one isn't as bad because Jared Leto is kind of framed as this guy from the beginning, so it's not as annoying. But like I think about The Big Short, which I also liked a lot. But they have the Steve Carell character.
Oh, at the end where he's like, I'm not gonna sell morally.
Yeah, corporations shouldn't be doing this, bro. And it's like you're ripping your whole life has been ripping people off. You're now ripping more people off. Like, you don't get to make this more quandary now. Like you're too far down. You know?
Yeah, you're already a huge asshole.
Yeah,
from the beginning, from the first scene.
Jared Leto, you've been selling guns and doing cocaine for so long. Like, what's one of your job? You know?
Yeah, and I almost think though it does work because he still gets away with it in the end. Like Nick Cage, like even though they do find his guns. An amazing scene where his wife is tailing him while Hallelujah is playing again, the most on point music choice. And then they tail the wife. They find like his stash, like passports and stuff, but he still gets out of it because the United States government is like one of his biggest clients, and you're like, yeah, that's 100% correct. That's what would happen.
Yeah, and that's a good scene too, where like he tells Ethan Hawke, like he breaks down, like, "Oh yeah, I sell to very powerful people, including your boss," and it's like, and it immediately happens like that second, because of course it does.
Yeah.
But I think it's that thing where and I like that they bring it up at the end almost as a twist, but it's one of those twists where like it was looming over the entire movie. Like,
it'll like there was a few random kind of intercut of him like dealing with U.S. generals in the shadows. So it's almost like it's not out of nowhere. Yeah. It's very like, no, this has like been established, even if the movie's not about that.
Yeah. And I think it's that thing where like there's a scene where Ian Holm tells him at the beginning like, oh, bullets can change governments faster than boats. Because everyone talks like that in this film.
Right.
But like that's like, and that's what I'm saying. Like that whole thing where it's like the whole time he's like, oh yeah, I'm eluding cops and I'm doing this, and it's like, but you're really not. You're really just eluding Ethan Hawke's character, which again is why I wouldn't have minded him. It's like, and it's established at the end, but every general in America knows what you're doing. They just don't give a shit, or they're probably helping you in some way.
Right.
Like,
you're not this clandestine spy.
Yeah. It's like you think that the Bush administration gives a shit if you're selling arms to Sierra Leone. If anything, they're giving you more arms. You know?
Right.
Yeah,
the enemy of your enemy.
That is kind of the funny, because early on he's like, oh, Ian Holm, you pick the winners. I just sell to everyone. And then you find out that like Ian Holm basically sells guns for the CIA, and it's like,
you're right.
Yeah, I mean, that's picking a side. It's still the most evil side, because the CIA is only doing bad shit in those countries, But
right. And I think like that's the thing is that they're always like, I don't know. It's such a funny like, wars are gonna be forever, but also it's fun to do. Like, it's just such a like scummy movie. Like everyone in the movie is so scummy.
Yeah.
And then at the end, they do that thing that all these movies do, where they're like, "Yeah, I'm gonna keep going."
I heard they're doing a sequel, and I'm like, oh, I don't think
I've read that too. What's the point?
I don't know if it's gonna work.
That's literally gonna be the only trivia that we'll probably do this week. Trivia's back, but they're doing a sequel.
Oh no, there's some good trivia for this too.
That's going to, I don't know. They said they announced it last year, so we'll see what happens.
It
is one of those things where it's supposed to be about them being rivals.
Yeah,
I kind of feel like
it's weird.
if you'd wanna like make a movie about selling guns in like 2024, you'd kind of
Yeah.
have to bring up who America's currently selling guns to, and I don't think the movie's gonna do that. So
Yeah.
I just don't know
Way
if it's
too
gonna
touchy right
hit.
now.
It's
Yeah,
Yeah.
also like I think of I did that deep dive about Young Guns to Young Guns 2, where it's like the more you kind of learn about Merchants of Death or Outlaw Cowboys, the sadder that story becomes. Because there's
Right.
like, it doesn't matter if Tony Soprano gets shot in the diner or not, it's coming eventually.
Hmm.
And so, like, yeah, what's this? It's just going to be like, doesn't, he's going to pass the thing over to his son. But
Right.
so I mean, it could be good. And this movie's good. I trust it's the same team, so it could be
yeah.
cool.
No, it could work out. It's
Yeah.
like you almost said everything you could say about it because nothing's
Yeah.
Right.
changed. So
Right.
That's
it's
a
Yeah.
just
better
going to
way
be
to say what I was
redundant.
trying to say.
Right.
No,
Right.
you know what's one good trivia about this is at the very beginning of the movie. You kind of mentioned it where he talks about how one of the reasons he had so many guns to sell is it cost the U.S. more to bring guns back from a conflict zone than to just buy new ones, and that's how he can sell the guns. And when they were filming this movie, it would have literally cost more to buy fake guns for all the scenes with mass amounts of like gun stockpiles than to just use real guns because there's so many. So
Oh,
Yeah.
whoa.
most of the guns in those scenes where you see like thousands of guns like stacked up
Yeah.
are just like real AKs. So it was like, damn,
Damn.
even the
That's so
filmmaking
funny.
is a point about gun running.
Right. Right.
You
Damn,
cannot
that's fucking
escape
crazy.
it. I know, right? Yeah.
I know.
What
That
a-
is funny. That's an interesting tidbit.
yeah.
Yeah. Guys, any last words? Any last words on Lord of the War?
I mean, good movie. It's definitely Casino Goodfellas light, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
in no
I
way is that a
call it
bad thing necessarily.
Wolf of Wall Street light. It's like my
Yeah.
biggest like 5-star probably should be a 3-star movie, but I'm giving it 5 because it's so fun.
Yeah.
It's it's great.
Yeah.
Check it
It's
out.
fun.
Definitely
fun
check it
film.
out. Definitely
But
worth it.
yeah, I think it's worth it too. I would definitely like. Again, it's like one of those movies where it's a good one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for September we're gonna have a live episode. You'll see that I think next week probably, and then we'll have a couple more things for Halloween. We're gonna have a theme, of course, and there's gonna be more cool stuff starting in October. Stuff that involves you giving us money. But so come check it out. We're have fun. Yeah, let us know. We also we do have recommendations. We are gonna get to them, but you caught us in the middle of a billion themed weeks, so we'll get to them eventually. But thank you guys
Yeah.
for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Bomb Squad.